Good morning on this beautiful Saturday morning, just 7 days and about 10 hours away from the 142nd running of the Kentucky Derby. I'm sure everybody's excited about that. It's always a great way to kick off spring. My name is Tom Gallo. I'm president of the New York Thoroughbred Breeders and the fearless leader of our wonderful group of professionals, board members, and staff, including our Mr. Superman, Mr. Jeffrey Canizzo. I'm El Presidente, he's El Jefe. So, we're going to get started. This is going to be number 2 in our series of educational seminars. Again, the reason we are here, I don't want to block anybody, the reason we are here is to spread the word and disseminate as much helpful information as we can to all the breeders in the state in order to make it easier for you to raise a better horse. As a result of raising a better horse, you will garner and be rewarded by Breeders' Awards, which is one of the wonderful things about breeding in New York. You get money for raising a nice horse. So I want to thank our sponsors, the New York Thoroughbred Breeding and Development Fund, Tracy Egan. Let's have a big hand for the New York Thoroughbred Breeding and Development Fund. 2 reasons. Number 1, for sponsoring this event, and number 2, because she signs your breeders' checks. And also, of course, we'd like to thank Fasig-Tipton again for allowing us to use this fabulous facility, which hopefully, if you raise a nice horse, it'll end up right here where I'm standing, and it'll bring, the numbers will start to clip up there, and you'll get all excited, and if it goes for more than you thought, then you get a little tear in your eye, and then you go running out to the cashier. But anyway, without further ado, I'm going to let Jeff take over and introduce our speakers. Thank you again for coming.
Okay, welcome, for all the reasons Tom said. I'm Jeff Canizzo, and I know many of you, if I don't know you, please, after this, be happy to talk more. I'm going to get us rolling because we have quite a bit of material to go through. We're going to have, our seminar is going to have a structure that we'll talk about in a minute, but what I'd like to do is actually give you a quick background about our speakers who are here. Tom Gallo, who you just met, is the president of NYTB, is the owner of Parting Glass Racing, Tom Gallo Sales Agency, and Bluestone Farm, which is in Cambridge, New York. He's been involved with the industry for over 36 years, from the ground up, which started in Kentucky when he moved here in 1980 and bought Bluestone Farm in Cambridge. He runs Parting Glass Racing, which is a partnership, sells yearlings, weanlings, and broodmares. We have Seth Gregory, who is immediately to my right here, who's a new board of director of NYTB, and he's the owner of Innisfree Farm, which is located in Galway, New York. He's a 3rd-generation agriculturalist, a graduate of Cornell University, and has worked in Kentucky breeding farms such as TaylorMade and Brookside. He spent 12 years as the assistant trainer on the Irish circuit for the likes of Bill Mott, Mark Henning, Tom Albatrani, and has been breeding NYBreds for about 15 years in the commercial market. Lois Engel, immediately to his right, is an NYTB director, and she's a managing director and owner of Pucker Ridge Farm and Pucker Ridge Racing, which is located in Warrensburg, New York. For the last 2 decades, Lois has been breeding and racing foals at her farm. Again, in Warrensburg, she boards horses for various clients there, and as well as her own. In addition to Pucker Ridge Farm, she's employed by Honeywell International as a telecommunications manager. To her right, Mike McMahon. He's the founder and co-owner of McMahon & Hill Bloodstock, Bourbon Lane Racing Stable, Spruce Lane Pinhook, and Spruce Lane Farm, which is in Lexington, Kentucky. Mike is a graduate of Cornell as well, and the Irish National Stud Program. He's been a lifelong horseman. Notably, he played a role in New York's first Kentucky Derby winner, Funnyside, here in Saratoga. He was named to the Thoroughbred Times 40 Under 40 for his leadership roles in our industry. He's a trustee of TOBA and the TCA, and Mike was actually the former president of NYTB, who happened to hire me in 2008. We like Mike. And the last person that I want to introduce and tell you about is Dr. Joan Taylor, who's also an NYTB Board of Director and co-owner of Stepwise Farm, which is here in Saratoga. She's been involved with horses her entire life as a competitive rider, as a veterinarian, and as a thoroughbred horse breeder. She's a graduate of Tufts Vet School in 1983, completed externships at Bluegrass Farm, Claiborne Farm, Haggard, Davidson McGee in Kentucky, and has practiced here in New York. In 1990, with her husband, Dr. William Wilmot, they started Stepwise Farm, breeding and selling the quality thoroughbreds for the commercial market as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Joan Taylor, who is the chair of our education committee, which has put on this seminar, put on our last seminar, and has put together a structure of educational components to help here at the breeding industry. And she's going to tell you about the format for today's seminar and how this is going to work along with our agenda. So without further ado, Ms. Joan Taylor.
Thanks all for coming. There we go. As Tom alluded to, the Educational Seminar Committee was set up basically to use the knowledge we have in this state to share best husbandry practices for equine breeding farms so that we can continue to increase our ability to raise top New York breds. You all know there's a lot of hoops these horses need to jump through to succeed at the sales and at the racetrack. And with that said, our first seminar was well attended and we got lots of feedback. I'm going to ask just the people who are on the educational committee on the board to please raise their hands. Myself and these people, if you have comments, ideas for new seminars, topics you'd like to hear, please, we love feedback. These are your seminars for you. So we're very interested in hearing your response and we got lots of feedback on the last one. If you look at the syllabus that you have in hand, that will follow the PowerPoint, and the program is divided into two parts. The syllabus gets somewhat technical. In no way are we giving veterinary advice. This is just a reference to give you an overall view. We encourage you to work with your professionals, your veterinarian, your blacksmith. This is for breeders to share information with breeders at this point. Down the line, we may have veterinarians speaking. It's divided into two parts. Its focus is raising a quality yearling with an emphasis on conformation, but you'll also get tips from these experienced breeders and speakers on presentation, education of the baby, et cetera, as we go along. Part one is just the basics. Part two is congenital problems, things that foals are born with and what you can do about them. And part three is developmental disease, which we can prevent sometimes, but we certainly can deal with. Don't get nervous till it's 2 weeks before the sale. There'll be questions and answers after each section, so save your questions for that. The last part after intermission will be a panel discussion, and that's going to include the members of our panel who actually have trained or buy horses in addition to raising them. And that will put it all in perspective about what buyers really want, how raising your best yearling fits in. So, without further ado, Seth Gregory.
How are y'all this morning? Yep. All right, so I think I've got the easiest section. I think Lois and Mike might have got the more difficult section. But we're going to start off here with section 1, managing the growth of foals to yearling and general guidelines. So we're going to start with the newborn's conformation. Okay, the normal conformation of a newborn foal is to slightly toe out. So you're going to have a foal that hits the ground, they're going to come out, they're going to pop out like this. It's normal. Don't get too concerned. You do have to keep an eye on their legs. Basically what you want to do is you want to look at the foal's conformation and picture their front limbs as building blocks stacked up. So varying shapes and sizes, but you want those building blocks to stack up. You want the surfaces to be level. If they don't, then you're looking at deformities. In the case of this foal that we're looking at, I'd say if we had to pick on one leg or the other, his left fore looks like the leg that's going to be a bigger issue. He does tend to show a little bit of carpus valgus, which is I call breaking in, which would make them toe out. Again, as he ages, you'll get a little bit of better idea of what's going on there. Pardon? All right. Proper growth and development. Proper growth and development depends on a complex interaction between genetics and environment and nutrition. All right. The first topic here is the one that I think is the most important. Start by breeding correct stock so genetics are on your side. I think Mike and I both took genetics at Cornell, didn't we? How'd you do? What'd you get?
They talked about cattle and pigs.
Exactly. So, but basically, Cornell was always about basic science. A lot of times we were sitting there going, not a dairy cow as example again. But basically, genetics is a study of how genes interact with one another. So we talked about genotype a lot. Genotype is basically the sequencing of DNA, which then will give your animal its physical characteristics, which is called phenotype. Conformation is the physical appearance of genotype. That being said, if you start with an incorrect dam or an incorrect sire, you're already up against it. Kind of reminds me of an old term from computer science, garbage in, garbage out. If you put something bad in, there's a greater likelihood that you're going to get something bad out. So we all have budgets, but the best thing to do is try to start out with the correct mare and breed her to a correct sire. And then I'm going to ask you a real quick question. If you've got a mare that toes out, what type of stallion are you going to select? Does anybody want to answer that question? Go ahead. Good answer. Very important. You don't select opposing faults. If you do that, you're increasing your incidence of having a bad foal because both parents have bad genes. That said, we'll go on. So then we need to learn to calculate and provide the correct amount of exercise. That, again, is an art. I think the most important thing with a newborn is to take a quick look, understand if they're contracted or not. Contracted foals, contracted tendons, have a very upright appearance. They can even knuckle over if they're contracted to a certain extent. Causes of this can be plant toxins, malpositioning in utero. There's a host of causes. Once they're on the ground and you know you have the problem, first and foremost, make sure that the foal can get around well enough that he's nursing properly and can get colostrum. Get your vet out, have him take a look. Usually you'll treat with oxytetracycline, which actually binds calcium and lets the tendons relax and the connections between the tendons and muscles soften. These are the foals that I would say are the most important to limit their exercise until they relax. You think about it, if you go to the gym, you get sore, every tendon and ligament in your body gets tight. You don't want to go try to stretch it too fast or too quick. The other option there too is to use manual stretching in concert with the oxytet. Basically, you would push back on the foal's knee while rotating his foot forward and just easily and gently and try to help manipulate and loosen that up. All right, then we're going to talk about foals that have slack soft tissue. They walk on their ankles, back of their ankles. These are the foals that actually need more exercise than less because that exercise actually helps strengthen the tissues. Provide a balanced and healthy diet for early stages of development, pregnant mare, lactating mare, foals, weanlings, and yearlings in the appropriate amount. What's appropriate? Each animal is going to tell you the difference. What's important, what's working for them. I think Mike and I both took animal nutrition. Do you know how to balance a ration anymore?
I look at the animal and decide if it looks a little heavy or light.
Yeah, I mean, we could.
I'm pretty practical.
I know if I had to balance a ration right now, I would, on paper or on a computer, I would fail miserably. It comes down to looking at the animal. Buy a commercially manufactured feed from a reputable supplier They've got hundreds and hundreds of years of experience. There's lots of scientists that have been working on this for 100 years. I know there was a pinhooker in the 90s that was very successful named Jerry Bailey, and I had a friend that had some horses with him, and he asked him about his feeding program one day, and he said, do you add this, do you add that? And Jerry goes, nope, I feed Omeline. Friend said, why don't you add anything? Jerry, who happened to be a vet as well, said, well, Purina's been around for over 100 years. They've been working on that ration for over 100 years. I think they've got a lot more knowledge than I do. So I'm just going to roll with what they do and hope it works out. All right, here we go. Now we're at dietary approach. A moderate growth rate prevents developmental problems. Bet we have a lot of parents out here, don't we? You brought your newborn home. You didn't expect them to be 6 feet tall in a month, did you? You knew that there was going to be a period that it took for them to grow, and that there were going to be different rates at different times. Foals are very much the same way. And as a matter of fact, the other part of this is a genetic component. They're preordained. When they hit the ground, their body knows how big they're going to be. You can't feed them bigger and stronger than their genes, their genetics has preordained them to be. So you want to have the growth rate moderate. Moderate, again, comes down to looking at the animal. Is he too heavy? Is he too light? For me, a lot of times, I think the most important thing is, it's almost like looking at any other animal or dog. Can you see ribs? If you can't see ribs, that's great. They're probably getting enough. If you can't feel ribs, they're probably a little heavy, which then goes on to our next topic. Over rapid growth is associated with contracted tendons, epiphysitis, angular limb deformities, and developmental orthopedic diseases. This is where Mike and Lois come in. So we're not going to say too much about that in this section, except for the fact that epiphysitis is a swelling of growth plates, which is often caused by excessive exercise or the foal being too heavy. OCDs are lesions, which again can be caused by the same things. And basically, cartilage doesn't form into bone properly, and you get bone lesions. Okay? Working with a professional to make sure your horse's diet's balanced for vitamins, minerals, energy. Again, there are lots of nutritionists out there that they know how to balance rations. They can help you with that program. But most importantly, feed them. I say feeding. People ask me sometimes, what do you feed your horses? It's the Nike approach. I just do it. Good green leafy hay, the best commercially made concentrate that I can afford, and watch them. If your mare's a little light, she needs more. If you see ribs, again, your foal's ribby, or has a ewe-neck, something's going on there. They need a little bit more grub. And people talk about weighing their feed. I don't know about you, I don't keep a scale in the barn. I've got a feed scoop. If one scoop's not doing enough, two scoops might do it. If 2 scoops don't do it, then we're going to have to take another look. All right, pay particular attention to providing calcium, phosphorus, copper, zinc, selenium, vitamin E, and in proper amounts and ratios. Okay. Vitamins and minerals basically regulate all kinds of functions in the body. They bolster the immune system. In our case, the most important part is they are very important in production of bone. The reason we want to look at the ratios is when they're out of balance, they can create problems. For example, one cause that we know of OCD lesions is a deficiency in copper. If you have too much zinc in your diet, the absorption of copper goes awry, and hence you can have an OCD. Okay. Diets should always include high-quality roughage and pasture, free choice, and unlimited clean water. Okay, we always have to bear in mind that horses are grazing animals, so their intestines, their GI tract is all about quantity, moving through. They always want to have roughage in their diet. It's all part of function. Need to keep things moving along. Clean water, very important. Do we know why? Most important thing is mom needs water to produce milk, and the animals use an immense amount of water to synthesize protein into muscle. All right, so early foal nutrition. First 10 to 12 weeks of a foal's life, most of their nutrition comes from milk. That's pretty simple. Now here's where I think a lot of people might not have the same approach that I do. We're going to cover that a little bit later on. A lot of people don't introduce concentrate to their foals very early. I have foals that at day 1 are in mom's tub. They're already trying to figure it out. They're already getting a little bit of concentrate. They're over in the hay, taking little bites. Sometimes they sound like a kid that stole his mother's or father's cigarettes. They're coughing because of the tickling. But the more precocious they are, the quicker you're going to see them try to get in the tub. And I think that actually helps them later on, especially during weaning. Adjust the mare's diet to address increased caloric needs of lactation. It's pretty simple once again. If mom's got to put energy out for the baby, she needs more. You're going to see in late gestation, a lot of your mares will back out of their tub. They'll start eating less concentrate and just continue on with the hay. A lot of times that's because stomach space is being constricted by the foal. After they foal, they're going to need a bump in energy. Do you want to go right at it? Fill the tub? No. Their milk production actually is going to lag a little bit. They're not going to max out. It's kind of a bell curve. They'll start off a little slow and then pick up over the next few weeks. So you have plenty of time to increase their concentrate as time goes by. Okay. Be sure that your foal is getting enough milk by carefully observing nursing behavior and demeanor. All right. This is kind of an interesting topic. Does everyone know what foals do to stimulate milk letdown? Foals, calves, just about any. Vivian's got it. They butt their dam's flank with their head. It actually stimulates the release of oxytocin, which causes milk letdown. If you have a foal that you see that's constantly walking up to its dam, trying to nurse and butting it in the flank, that's telling you something. That's saying, you know what? Something's going on here. Mom's not making enough milk. He's not getting what he wants. Other behavior that you'll see are foals trying to do what I call getting up under the hood, which is they'll walk up to other mares and try to nurse off them. They may try to nurse off another foal. And typically, one other thing you'll notice is a mare or a foal that you see constantly nursing but isn't growing and isn't putting on weight. All right, now we're going to talk about the milk to grain transition. So essentially, before weaning, you want to get them on a concentrate. This is a feeder that has these bars that are supposed to keep the mare out of the tub. I don't know about any of you, but I've never had any luck with those things. Every one of them ends up on the floor. The mare will work their nose down into it, pick it up off the wall, and drop it so that they can get to it. So I put feeders like this in the stalls in the mare and foals. They don't have the bars on it. Foal has a tub, mom has a tub. What you'll actually see most of the time is mare goes to the foal's tub, the foal goes to the mare's tub. But it's an interesting interaction, and I think basically it actually helps them later on in life. You never really thought about having to fight for your food with your mom, but you know what? In this case, it's good for them. They'll get it down. Mom will get kicked once in a while when they don't want her in their tub. They might get talked to a little bit, get nipped at, but I think it's a great interaction between mom and foal and teaches these kids that they actually do need to fight for something. Divide your rations into 2 and 3 feedings as foals have small stomachs. Pretty simple. The more often you give them an opportunity to eat, As they grow, they're going to get more nutrition. And always remember that horses, because they're grazing animals, everything passes through their GI tract fairly rapidly. So it comes down to the frequency allows for them to get more absorption. Weaning is usually done between 4 and 6 months of age, at which time concentrates increased to 60 to 70% of the ration, roughage to 30 to 40%. By the time a horse is 2 years old, it's closer to 50-50. Pretty simple. Milk has a lot of energy, so when they're weaned, they need a high energy concentrate. As they get bigger and stronger, they'll get more from the forage. You can back down on the concentrate. All right. The art of feeding weanlings to yearlings is observing body condition. I think we touched on that a little bit before. It's basically just like looking at your kid and saying, hey, is he thin? Is he fat? Is he thrifty? Is he not doing well? So you can constantly look at that every day. It should be part of your days. How is this foal looking? Along with that, based on what you're seeing from their weight, you're going to notice other things: swelling of joints, epiphysitis. That's telling you that your foal might be too heavy or growing a little too fast, at which point you might want to restrict concentrates. Take mom and the foal to a field that's not quite as grassy. There's a few different ways you can adjust that. Avoid underfeeding the future athlete. Pretty simple. You got to fuel the fire. You can have a really fast car with a big motor. If there's no fuel in it, you're sitting in the parking lot. All right. Okay, again, evaluate the animal at regular intervals. It says weekly. I evaluate them every day. I mean, I think the first couple of weeks of their life, you kind of close your eyes and walk away and say, okay, we're going to let these guys get their legs up under them and see what they're like. At about 2 to 3 weeks, you start getting critical, start picking them apart, and paying a great deal of attention to where's that leg going, what's that leg doing, what can we do here. Evaluation should be while the foal is stationary and at a walk. Locomotion is going to tell you a lot about how they're doing. If they're not moving well, if you watch them paddle, drag a toe, it's giving you a hint that there's something wrong. Design an excellent parasite control program with your veterinarian. That I can't stress is, I can't overstress the importance. Again, it comes back to my point about feeding the future athlete. What are we all paying for hay? How much you paying for a bale? $5, $6, depending on where you are. $400 or $500 a ton for feed. Parasites limit your horse's digestive efficiencies. Basically, if there are parasites in your GI tract, in your animal's GI tract, they can't absorb nutrients properly. Having parasites causes limiting of absorption. Basically, a lot of your money's going out the back end. And they can't grow as quickly and to the potential that they have. And that being said, parasite control can't be limited to opening one of these and sticking it in their mouth. You have to think about it as a systemic approach. Stocking density is extraordinarily important. If you've got a field that's overeaten with tons of manure, that's already creating stress. Normally in a field that's big enough, you'll watch, horses will defecate. They walk away from the pile. They don't want to be around that stuff. It smells bad. In a case where stocking density is too high and there's not enough forage, they're going to graze closer to those piles, which is where the larvae are, and they re-ingest it, reinfect themselves. So stocking density is extraordinarily important. You also want to break up piles at any chance you have. Basically, the idea is cook those larvae, bake them. So you also have to maintain a certain length grass. Keep your grass at a level that the larvae can get hit by sun. If you get grass that's too high, first of all, your horses aren't going to want to eat it. It's higher in cellulosic content. It doesn't taste as good. And you're not giving the sun a chance to do its job. Another way is to rotate pastures, rotate species. Most of the parasites that affect horses don't bother cattle and sheep. So you can rotate them in, keep the grass aid off, but it breaks up the life cycle so that the larvae can't find a host and start the cycle again. Corrective care strategy. You're going to work with your vet and blacksmith early and often to develop a plan to correct problems and use all available tools. First one, hoof trimming to rebalance the foot and relieve uneven stress on growth plates. I actually think this is the most important part of this section. I am not a big surgery guy. I want to start with a correct mare and then try to fix all of our issues with corrective trimming. This is also a very inexpensive tool that if you learn to use it properly, you can help yourself out a great deal. It's a rasp. Probably costs you about $20. If you can develop a relationship with your blacksmith and have him explain to you what he's doing, you can reinforce what he's done between visits. A month, 6 weeks between visits, sometimes correction goes away pretty quick, especially in a foal that's very active. So you can reinforce the correction in between visits. The other thing that happens there is too, if you're doing that, your foal gets a little bit more accustomed to having someone playing with his feet, getting under him. And I don't know about you, but I know a lot of blacksmiths that get pretty surly with foals that don't want to act right. You're probably not getting their best effort oftentimes if your foals aren't acting right. All right, hoof extensions and glue-on shoes. A lot of times you can do that with Equilocks. You can build up a wing. The idea is basically if your foal toes out, you're going to put a wing on the inside, which causes the foot to break over. You're basically trying to pull the limb back around. Would be the exact opposite for toeing out, or toeing in, I'm sorry. All right, if you have some issues, swelling in joints, sore foal, you want to reduce exercise. All right, we're going to diet alternation with reduced feed intakes, focus on carbohydrates. Again, that comes down to a foal that looks like it's got epiphysitis, swelling in the joints. You can alternate the diet in many ways. One way is bring mom and foal in, get them off grass. The other way is to cut back on the concentrate. Again, bandaging and splinting. I am not a big proponent of splinting for the simple fact that the foal's skin's very thin and delicate, and if you're not on top of it, you can create sores and get infections. Physical therapy. I think we already covered that a little bit with the idea of stretching foals with contractions and medications. That's a section that I'd leave to the veterinarians. Timely surgical interventions depend on the problem severity and timing of the closure of growth plates. That said, ankles, growth plates close a lot quicker than knees. You want to keep an eye on your ankles. The lower part of the limb, correction needs to be made faster there than in the knee. And I think I may be done. Section 2.
About a round of applause for Seth. Certainly proving why he's the next generation here of breeding in New York. We're going to do a Q&A after each section. So why don't I open the floor up? We have two people that are going to walk around with microphones. Kara in the blue and Joan here in the gray.
It's not so much a question, but you started with correct mare, correct stallion. Then you get into the surgical maneuvers. Can you ever find out if the mare or the stallion was indeed correct or not stripped or not, surgically, improved?
Sadly, in most cases, no. Again, I mentioned that I am not a proponent of much surgical intervention. comes down to the economics. Not too many people are going to want to tell you that they corrected one. And I think that for me, philosophically, it is a disservice to the breed. I mean, we could have an entire day or topic about that. I know, other breeds, they have to go through an inspection process to get their foal papers, to get registered. We don't here, and again, it's a dollars and cents thing. People are gonna, as long as there's money to be made, people will surgically intervene. But I think it is a disservice to the breed, and it's not something that I do. Hope that helps a little bit.
Richard, let me add something. I think that goes back to genotype versus phenotype. And like I know that you have families that you trust, that you followed for years. And the reason why you trust them and you follow them for years is because there's good genes there and they should produce good runners. They probably produce good runners because they produce good, correct, athletic horses. If you're looking at pedigrees and there's very little black type on them, those are probably bad genes. They probably produce crooked horses or unathletic horses or unhealthy horses, and you end up with the problems of having to do surgeries and so on more often than if you stick to better families.
Yeah, we're actually considering having another educational series that is reading a catalog page and the buyer's guide and interpreting that. And I think that your question falls right into that wheelhouse, because you'll see over and over again, if you get the buyer's guide out and you look at the catalog page, you'll see that there are families that the yearlings all sell for $1,500, $2,000. And that's telling you that they don't look so good when they're yearlings. So that's a way to kind of keep an eye on that factor.
And to add to that, any surgeries that are done on sale horses have to be reported. So when you look at yearlings, look at horses as weanlings, yearlings, or 2-year-olds, if they have had corrective surgery, that has to be reported, and it is in the repository. So if you're following yearlings, or you know a bloodstock agent or a sales agent that has been following yearlings for generations, which a lot of us have, you may have those notations and know that a particular mare or stallion did have, corrective surgery as a weanling or a weanling or a yearling. So there is a record, that follow the horses, but they would have to have gone through a sale and been in the repository.
Yes, so having a correct mare, obviously your budget depends on how correct, and there's, a lot of folks, including me, who would probably have to have a mare with some faults. And I guess my question is, to what degree or what conformational fault would you say, hey, maybe this is worth breeding this mare and trying to get a good foal versus this mare is not worth trying to breed whatsoever? I mean, are there any sort of faults that are more forgivable versus others? And
Yes. If you were to think about it, again, it's going to come down to varying degrees of fault as well. I mean, toes out a little bit versus perfectly straight, toes in a little bit. I tend to stay away from mares that toe in as young mares. As they get older, as part of the aging process, all mares will toe in. But from my time on the racetrack, horses that toe in just don't last, especially when the deformity is from the ankle down. You see constant sesamoid fractures, and they're done and gone fast. Faults that I tend to get over are knees that break in slightly and horses that'll toe out a little bit. From the time on the track, again, I call those racehorse legs, because they seem to give themselves a little bit of shock absorption there. Again, we know when we come here, it's a horse show. They've got to be pretty. They've got to be correct. It doesn't always translate to athletic performance. You see lots of really expensive sales yearlings that were perfect, that can't run their way out of a paper bag. So yeah, I mean, there are certain traits that you can give on. I think, again, that comes down to as well following families and or sire lines and understanding, you know, what their faults are. I mean, I think if we look back to the 90s, there was a leading sire that he had a left knee that bucked out, and he threw it all the time. And I think Mike knows who I'm talking about. Yeah, horse called Stormcat, and he had how many stakes winners? What are we up to? You know, so there are certain traits that you have to go, okay, that just comes down to, you know, who this horse's sire or dam is. And, you know, when we go to the sales ring, those agents, those trainers that are buying those horses know that's Stormcat's left knee. That's what we're going to get. If we want to have that kind of horse in our barn, we're going to have to live with it.
Yeah, Joan, it's questionable.
Are there some genetic testing that can be done on the mares to tell what genotypes they have?
I don't know if anybody's gotten that far in a mapping to see, based on DNA sequencing, if you can tell what the incidence of faults is going to be. I don't think anybody's gotten that far.
I think there's actually two companies that do it. One is Irish, and it's used by a lot of the expensive ones. You know, I think you're taking a leap of faith that that's what the ultimate answer is, and it's very expensive. There's not one that there's no kit around that you should be using right now.